Welcome back to the Kingsway Podcast.
Welcome.
Glad you're here. Hi, Ryan.
Hey.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
If you're listening, it's me and Ryan here in our studio, our digital, what do we call this, a media room?
I just say video production room.
There you go.
Or media production room would probably be better.
Very professional.
Yeah.
If you're listening online, I am so glad you are. We had some great feedback after our last podcast, and I just want to do a quick follow-up. We did a rather aggressive titled, Go to Counseling.
It wasn't like, this is why you should go to counseling. It was like, you're broken, go to counseling, or whatever. It was really aggressively titled for a purpose.
It was aggressively titled, but I think it was intentionally titled, because if you listen to it, it was more about recognizing that counseling isn't the last stitch. We want it to be.
It can be.
It can be, but we want it to be something more of like, hey, you should have this on your normal radar and recognize that it may be more helpful for you than you originally were thought or has been thought about. So we appreciate the feedback on that, and we're hoping to do a follow-up with potentially somebody that has a little bit more experience in the actual counseling realm.
Or with somebody just with more counseling experience, like being counseled.
Absolutely.
Something else beyond just us.
But I think it was kind of a nerve that we knew going into it. There was probably some people that needed to hear it, but I think it was even more people that I think needed to hear it, which is good. That's good.
Yeah.
And I want to help anybody that can take you and I are vulnerable and trying to be as open as we can to a healthy extent to help others make those choices to take those healthy places too. So,
yeah.
Today is going to be kind of a branch off of that. Number of things going on in my life and things that I'm learning and growing and teaching and reading, and kind of all intersect with the topic of today. And if you've read the title already, you see this like intersection of failure, or, basically this place where you find yourself. What do you do after you fail?
Yeah.
Like, what do you do?
This can be a part of counseling.
Mm-hmm.
This can also be a part of life coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that just like makes me want to cough or dry heave saying life coaching out loud. But to be fair,
like, I mean,
mentoring, life coaching,
like, it do a lot of things.
Yeah. I was a part of this, and this will tie into it all, but around 2020, 2021, somewhere around those years, for a year or so, I was a part of a ministry coaching group. This dude who we knew from our college gathered himself and me and 3 other guys who I graduated with who had been out in the ministry field for a few years, and brought us together over Zoom to do ministry coaching group sessions. And so we would all come together, have something that we felt stuck in every week. And what he would do is hear us out, and then without knowing anything about our area of ministry, our context, our whatever, would just ask good questions and try to help us find ways to get unstuck. Even if, so for example, I'll say this, it's not my proudest moment, but it is, it was very helpful to have that group. I was in a worship ministry position. You're ministering to the congregation every Sunday for an hour, but you're also ministering to your worship team volunteers, tech and music, and everybody else. And so I said, I feel stuck in how I relate to and minister to my volunteers who are women between like 35 and 55. I was like, I feel like we have nothing in common. Like, there's a social stigma about me taking them out to coffee or other things to get to know each other better so I can be invested in their lives. And so, like, I just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like, I'm close with all my other volunteers. If they're younger, college age, or close to that, I, like, understand their place in life and how we grew up and all that. If they're older, there's this, like, grandma-son kind of level to that relationship. But if they're, like, 35 to 55, I just had a hard time relating. And so through me talking about that, through all the questions he asked, he said, who are 3 worship pastors that you respect, my same job that I respect, who you think could have answers to this? And go and ask them. And that was one way to be unstuck, is to just go and ask people how they do it. It was this way to show up at a failure, or at least the way he phrased it, something you feel stuck in, that you can't overcome. And instead of feeling crippled by it, feel curious.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we want to try to instill
Yeah.
in today. And if I had a word that I've just, it's been a hot button word for me, it's been a linchpin word for me, it is curiosity. So I grew up in the church in a time, and maybe you did too, or maybe you were around a culture or a family or maybe a school system, maybe a job, where if you made mistakes, basically you were just told to stop it.
Yeah.
Like, just stop it.
Messing up.
Stop it. Like, if you knew what you were doing, how much it cost other people, if you knew what it was doing to your soul, you would just stop it. And what's funny is that sounds like it would work, right? Like it's like you realize when you when you lie, what is the Wonderful Life? Every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. Every time you lie, an angel loses its wings. Like something like that. Like it's fracturing your soul. There's something going on. And it was almost like this, like better type mentality. And listen, if you want to get a group of people to conform, that is one way to do it. But if you want people to actually be transformed, that is a very different. There's a very different way to do that, and I want to explain that real quick. So conformity means you learn how to act that way in front of the people that are going to judge you, and you learn to do things and to act a certain way so that everybody perceives you as transformed, in Christian circles specifically. But when you get curious to why these things have so much of an attraction to you, or why this mistake keeps happening in your life, or why this problem of anger seems to pop up, or this problem of depression or sadness, and we recognize there's lots of ways that can come about. But you'll only solve some of that or get to the bottom of it through curiosity. You have to start to ask different questions. So rather than why can't I stop it, is why do I want to do this?
Yeah.
Why do I want to do this? And that sounds dumb, but like your greatest regret, I promise you look back and you go, why did I do that? You know that. Like, you're like, why did I do that? And you can think back, and the reason you come up with, not a good enough reason most of the time. You're not like, well, yeah, I get it. Well, that's why my greatest regret happened. Most of the time you're like, no, that was not a good enough reason to have that regret. I would go back and I would think differently. So what happens, and does this make sense to you, Ryan? Like, the idea of curiosity, because I know when you ended that, you're a little putting that on the tee for me, which I really appreciate you doing.
You're
welcome. But what ends up happening when this becomes something that's innate inside of you is you start to be able to tell the difference between a lie and a truth.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is a lie will sound like the truth. And you can make it be your truth for a little while.
Yeah.
And you can live in it even for a while. And it will, in the end, reveal itself to not be the truth.
Yeah.
Particularly in addiction, you see this. So people that make the same mistakes over and over and over again, where you're like, why? You go to like Celebrate Recovery, and you just want to do the old Saturday Night Live counseling, like, just stop it. It's like, don't do it anymore. Just knock it off. And like, nobody in there, no matter if they're 20 years sober, 5 days sober, talks about it in that way. They still talk about it as if this is an inclination in me. This is something that goes on inside my soul, inside my body, inside my brain, that I constantly have to be curious about in order to stay healthy.
Yeah.
I have to constantly be growing and adapting. Now, I read a book by a guy named Day Springer. You can go and read this. It's called Sexual Healing Through Your Sexual Brokenness. Curiosity is actually God's calling from an action to the source of the problem. And his whole thought around this book is that how we act out is actually a trail. There's a trail from the temptation to the acting out, and then the acting out back to the temptation, back to the root of what God really wants to heal. So it's not about God just wanting to stamp out what you're doing. He's actually wanting you to get curious enough to go back and heal what's causing that.
Yeah.
And you can't get back to that until you get curious about what's causing it.
Yeah.
And I think that has been one of the most truest things for my anger, for my food, for some of the weight things that I've been working on in my own life, my diet. I think it's been that way for if I don't want to read my Bible or if I don't want to listen to like anything that I find myself not wanting to do a healthy thing and wanting to choose to do something that's unhealthy. I found myself asking different questions. Why don't I?
Yeah. And this is to do a tiny bit of brain science. I have 0 brain science training or degrees or anything like that. But I've been around people who have some, and so they can correct me when I say all this. The way our brains work is that, and this kind of ties back to our story series, how story saturates everything.
You can go check that out under our videos and
yes,
things.
It's like in the 110s or
it's like a 3 or 4 part series.
At least 3, something like that. First one starts with the Marvel movies. You can skip that. I'm kidding.
Yeah, quick plug.
It's great.
Yep.
Anyway, but so the world is too complicated, even more complicated than the word complicated. The world is too complicated for us to live in. And so we all simplify it with stories. And that's why both people for and against legal abortions have this strong moral conviction behind it. Not because they see 100% of the data in front of them and they're this is a clear moral evil or a moral good possibility. They summarize it into a story.
Yep.
And whatever side you're on, your story has the woman getting abortion with solid character traits that don't 100% match the data of who gets abortions. For people who are for legal abortions, they see a single mother who has a hard time getting a job to pay the sitter, to pay the bills, and do all this stuff, and she already has kids, or she's not in a financially well enough place. I know my wife's been watching Called the Midwife, a British like 1960s era show that like as they're talking about the abortion issue, and they're clearly in favor of legal abortions, not all the time, but they're clearly in favor of it. What the stories they tell that are fictional but could have happened are stories of like, I don't have enough crib space, so I keep this baby in this dresser drawer, and a rat bit it last night because we live in this super rundown part of London or something.
So they're very compelling.
And it's like, yeah, I would want to help that person. Like if they got pregnant again, I would want to help them figure it out. And like, if we had the people and the time and the resources, it'd be nice to have all of them be adopted, but maybe this is going to be best for whatever. Like that's a story that kind of sells you on abortions or should be legal and should be available.
Yeah.
But the story, the conservative right side spins, which I'm not saying spins or conservative right in any negative light. I'm just saying it to distinguish. The story they tell is it's people who just didn't try hard enough not to have kids, who were just too sexually loose and too whatever. And like to one degree, for most abortions, that is a little true. Like you have to have sex, and not even most of them are rape and whatever. Anyway, that whole conversation is simplified on both sides because we've summarized it into a story.
Yeah.
And so we can be a little more unconscious when we think about that. That's the way our habits work.
Yep.
We don't think consciously about everything we do in the day. When we breathe, when we blink, you're now thinking about breathing and blinking. When we do those things, we've summarized it and put it into muscle memory, and like we get it. And only when the story changes a little bit do we notice it again.
Yep.
But the more we do it, the more unconscious it is. And the more we wear this rut in these neural pathways that if I feel hungry, I'm going to go eat. But if I felt hungry once, driving home from Joplin on a Wednesday evening or whatever, late afternoon evening, and I stop by Casey's on Zora and Rangeline, and I get some pumpkin spice donuts, and I like it, then the next time, whether or not I'm hungry, I'm going to be a little hungry because my body is trained, even by just one time, a little bit in like, oh, you could totally do that.
100%.
And then as I build this habit, it no longer becomes a conscious decision. Do I want donuts at this gas station? It becomes, I feel compelled to get donuts at this gas station because that's just what I do.
Yep. That's who I am.
You wear ruts in these neural pathways that every time you run through it in any addiction, it just makes it stronger and stronger and stronger.
Absolutely.
And feeling broken about that is not going to solve it. feeling like it's not okay is fine. Feeling like it's not a good thing, it's a bad thing is fine.
Yeah.
But like feeling like you are crippled by that thing will not help you overcome that thing.
Well,
But curiosity about it will help you.
Absolutely.
overcome it.
And it's that thought we've talked about a lot, and I've talked about it on stage several times, and it's something that, you hear these like snippy little things on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube right now, and like they stick. And one of the things is the human brain cannot completely understand the negative. And so it's like, don't think about elephants, and you immediately think about elephants. Like you can't not think about them. And so in order to replace something that you don't want to do, you have to learn not to think about that thing.
Yeah.
So this is where shame comes in. This is why shame is so scary. Because the difference between guilt, what you just described, and shame is guilt is I did something wrong. So the easiest way to say it is I am a liar.
Yeah.
Is shame.
Yeah.
I lied is guilt.
Yeah.
And the difference between the two is one is I lied, but that hasn't moved into my identity yet. When it becomes I am a liar, that's when it moves into that's who I am. So then if you want to stop lying, guess what? Saying stop lying is actually not the way to stop lying.
It's almost reinforcing that
is.
You are a liar because that's all we talk about.
That's all you think about is I'm a liar, I'm a liar, I'm a liar. So when people say stop this, basically all they're doing is reinforcing that's their identity. It's shame taking root. So what you have to learn to do is go, I tell the truth. I tell the truth. That's what I do.
Yeah.
I tell the truth. And it's not a declaration of perfection. It's a declaration of your identity.
Yeah. You're aiming for who you want to be.
For who I want to be. And what ends up switching neurologically, I think for me, I have experienced this. Like, again, it's not my research is backed up by TikTok, but I mean, it's one of those, like, I've experienced what this feels like. And I believe when the Bible talks about renewing your mind and transforming your mind and taking every thought captive, I think spiritually, the Bible is reaching into, obviously science hadn't made those discoveries yet, but recognizing that your thoughts are the catalyst to your actions, and your actions are a revealing of your soul, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this part of where that starts. So here's why I think curiosity is so important, is because if you want to be a truth teller, but you keep lying and you can't figure out why you keep lying, you have to get curious about what you think you're gaining by the lie, or what you think you're protecting yourself from the lie, or what you think is being hidden by the lie that couldn't be revealed in the truth. And if you get curious about why you lie, that specific scenario, my mom caught me. She asked me, did I take the quarters, which we took all the quarters out of this clock that my parents did for their anniversary. They would put all their quarters in the clock, all their change for the whole year. And then at the anniversary, they'd take it out. My brother and I found out, took all the quarters out of it. And we're secretly buying like candy and like Blockbusters. Didn't know. Got away with it for a long time because we kept all the dimes and the nickels in there. But then they took it out and they were like, probably $100 worth of quarters were gone. And I remember my mom going like, did you take the quarters? And my initial thought was, oh, snaps. I'm going to be in trouble if I admit this. And she's going to think less of me. And I might have to pay her back. And the amount of pain that will be seems to be less than if I can just hide it with a lie.
Which is funny because the flashlight of her attention is burning your face off. Like, what are you going to hide?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's the whole point of it, is like once you get to a place where you recognize that is not an equal trade, where you go down that road and you realize like, hey, you're going to lose trust. You're going to break the relationship. You're probably not going to get away with it. And it's going to be double trouble. At least that's how it was in our house if you lie. Mm-hmm. And so you learn that lesson. And so you learn that when you lie again, you need to go back and you need to reinforce the truth. The truth of the matter is, I am a truthful person. And a truthful person, no matter the consequence, tells the truth.
This is why, I don't mean to get off track, but this is why it's finally putting words to why I had a hard time watching those Kirk Cameron college campus evangelism videos. Have you ever told a lie? Yeah. Well, the Bible says you are a liar.
Mhm.
And like, is that true? Maybe, but like that's not inspiring you to do anything different.
Mhm.
Maybe it's doom. It's making you feel doom about your situation, about your own wrongdoings and sins, which in the presence of a holy God is hard not to feel. Just look at Isaiah 6. It's like sees God face to face and crumples,
Yep.
saying, I'm a man of unclean lips from a nation or a people of unclean lips. And how can I stand before you? And God purifies him with this coal that he touches to his lips. And then says, I want you to go out and speak my message. Basically, it's a little cooler than that. But this whole process of like, we don't want to undervalue the negative weight of sin and mistakes and all that kind of stuff. But we live in a faith where Jesus bore our burdens, where we think that Jesus will bear the burdens of everyone who chooses to throw their burdens on him.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Matthew 11, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. I'm gentle and humble in heart. You'll find rest for your soul because my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
Walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it.
Yeah.
Unforced rhythms of grace.
Yeah. All that. Like, is there truth in like, if you reach the end, if you reach the final judgment and you have not repented for these things, and like, will you be marked as a sinner or some specific sin in your identity? Maybe, but you definitely don't have to be that way right now. Like,
No.
You definitely don't have to assume that you are stuck in that.
No.
And I don't know, like Jesus transforms murderers. Why do you think that lying is like the untransformable sin, or that like that has to be your identity when Jesus is standing here offering you a new one?
Well, and that's, I think the concept too is like, that's why Paul's cries so often are like, take off the old thing and put on the new, or be transformed. Because he's constantly trying to remind them that like, you can live in that old way of thinking if you want to, or you could remember to like, be transformed.
Yeah.
And like change things.
And so the spiritual side of that is take off you being a liar, even if you struggle with it still so.
Yep.
And put on somebody transformed in the image of Jesus. Put on Jesus himself.
Does this
that
look
way
like
you
the
say,
fruits of
like,
the Spirit? Does this sound like Jesus? Yeah.
I want to be like Jesus, therefore I tell the truth and whatever. Like it's not just like the power of positive thought.
Absolutely. No. And that's my whole thing is the curiosity is going to lead you to probably deep wounds. Like the curiosity leads to hard things. Like I don't want to make this sound simple. Like I think if you want real healing, especially if you have a repetitive thing or you have something like an emotional, capacity for deep anger or to just kind of pull away and detach and like not press in and like maybe the anxiety or fear of social, norms or embarrassment.
Fight or flight or freeze.
Yep.
Which I feel the most out of the three.
I'm a fawn, believe it or not. I try to make sure the enemy would calm down and like me again.
Oh my gosh. Stockholm syndrome.
Yes, basically. I'm just like going.
You're doing such a good job pointing that gun at us. Wow. Very handsome.
So, which I admitted to the junior hires last night when I taught. But I think why I'm so passionate about this is because I'd just been in the church my whole life, and I feel like I've only discovered this in the last 3 to 4 years, and it has been something of a that's why this didn't work. It felt like someone handed me a pick and told me transform your life into something that looks like Jesus. And the whole time, I wasn't curious to what was behind the wall or like what was causing the pain. I was just trying to keep the pain and the problems at bay. So it was just me chopping leaves and chopping branches and never being told, like, what's the root of all this? And just, obviously the root of it is the sinful nature, and we're all broken and we're all work in progress. That's fine. But you don't have to stay stuck in some of this stuff. And if you really want to move forward, I would tell you, and this is what Jay would tell you from the book. This is what Craig Rochelle would preach. The place of healing is through the pain.
Yeah.
It's through the pain of failure. It's through the pain of the heartache of what's happened. And it's really hard to look at yourself that honestly. When I think about David, when he's looking at some of the biggest mistakes in his life is when he writes things like Psalm 119, right? Search me, O God.
Yeah.
You know, see if there's anything unclean in me and lead me in the ways everlasting. There is a curiosity in him about even things that he doesn't even see as broken, but he wants to make sure are good and whole. Really, for me, it's a linchpin idea that I think can take failures and not take away the pain and not take away the consequence, but can leverage them for healing. Can really leverage them for healing and growth.
Yeah, I want to save this for the end, so I'll just kind of whenever it's the end, tell me. Yeah, but this you were talking about the Psalms and how it applies to this, and it makes me think. I think in Psalm 51, David mourning for his own David and Bathsheba event, where he was the man after God's own heart, like Israel's like front page, like we all want to be like this guy, and then he did this whole murder, rape, cover up, marry the widow thing.
Yeah.
That was like insert all the sins so you didn't do the rest of your life and just toss them in right
Sleep
here.
with a girl, kill her husband, get her pregnant,
try to cover it up
like it didn't happen.
and think you got away with it. And then one of God's prophets is like, you thought he didn't see that?
You are that man.
Yeah, through this parable, it's super cool. But in Psalm 51, he's like reflecting on that and his own brokenness and there's some ritual worship, sacrifice kind of stuff in there. Purge me with hyssop, which is like this branch that's only mentioned a handful of times in the scriptures, but it's always this like high priest or priest, maybe with blood on it sometimes, like sprinkling you with it because there's all this liquid on it, and they like, I don't know, flick it at you and sprinkle you with this, and it's supposed to be used for like ritual cleaning because you feel so guilty about what he's done, whatever. You get 13, 14 verses in, and he says, take away this heart of stone and give me a heart of flesh, or something like that. This deep surgery that isn't like, God, help me to stop thinking with the head of my male appendage and start thinking with the brain.
No, it's something completely different.
It's not the symptom.
No,
it's my heart is corrupt. There's something deep and wounded and broken in here.
And let's just take that for a second. So David goes up on the roof, sees Bathsheba, and then calls her into his whatever palace. They have sex. She gets pregnant. He finds out. In so many ways, then he kills Uriah, brings him back, whatever. He's like more righteous than David, which is crazy. The servant of the king is more righteous than the king.
Which is the way David and Saul were.
David and Saul, which is so cool.
Anyway.
But the concept of that is like, if you're in our culture and you do that, basically they would say, oh my gosh, you lustful jerk. You cannot control your carnal desires.
Yeah.
And what I would tell you is curiosity is, what made you think that Bathsheba would make you feel better? What part of that did you think was going to fix your loneliness?
Yeah.
Your heartache.
So the backstory, which you've just taught on this last week at youth group, and we've been through it a couple times, kind of the backstory that you can somewhat infer. It's hard when you're just reading it in English and it's thousands of years after it happened. But the way it starts is that David, the whole time leading up to this story, is this big war guy, the greatest action hero. Every kid has his action figure.
Wins every battle.
With the opposable or the moving elbow and knee joints and whatever. And like he's that cool. And that's where his comrades are. Even while he was on the run from the other king, who was not the rightful king, it was him and his commandos and whatever. That's where his friends are, his community, his camaraderie. So we start this story and it said David was in his palace at the usual time that kings are off at war.
Yep.
So why was he home? There may be some reason for that. Maybe he had a war injury. Maybe he had something to take care of. Maybe he had something tired. Yeah, maybe, or maybe there was some evil in his heart. But no matter what, how is that leaving him? Bored, lonely. None of this is Bathsheba's fault.
No.
Not even a little bit. But he put himself in this position.
Yeah.
Whether his circumstances said he should stay home or not, he put himself in this position.
And you can just see it. You can see it where he's going, I'm the king. I get what I want. I want this. Don't I deserve it? I'm the king that's united the entire nation of Israel.
Yeah.
I'm the one that's brought prosperity and success to the world. Don't I deserve? I mean, you read that into the text. Here's why I think this is really important to deep dive into something like that. Anger can be the same way. All of a sudden, you're like, why are you getting angry? Most of the time, it's a buildup.
Yeah.
It is not about the moment. It is attached to something that, for example, a lot of times when people are angry, short person syndrome would be one of them, right? Where people are really short when they're younger, they get very angry. Well, why is that? It's just because there's more anger in short people? No, not at all. It's because they feel already like they are not enough. They already feel like they're discounted, forgotten, neglected. And so the minute somebody says something like, oh, it doesn't matter, so-and-so can't ride the roller coaster anyway, they're too short, there is already this identity that's being tapped into, the shame that sits at the center of their life, and it is just ready to go like a ballistic missile, to come out. And so the deep dive is not control your fists, count to 10. The deep dive on that is, hey, you're enough.
Yeah.
You're okay.
Yeah. Now,
and like getting to the bottom of that is curiosity.
Now come back to David. When he was the righteous servant and the king over him, who is not the rightful king at that time, was not. What was he praised for? When, I don't know, chapter 18, 19, whatever, Saul has killed his thousands and David has killed his tens of thousands.
Yep.
No matter what made him stay home, you have to realize he's also staying home from praise, adoration, and glory, from earning that.
Yep.
This may be the first summer, the first whatever season it is that people got to war, the first season that he's at home and he's realizing, I can't farm any more honor for myself right now.
Yep.
What am I like? I'm lost. Did I peak? This is what a lot of people in the arc of a natural human life in our day and age, as you get older, you gain more and more responsibilities and skill and wisdom and all that kind of stuff. And there's this middle point where all of a sudden you start losing responsibilities. So when your kids get out of the house, that's not something you did wrong or something somebody's doing to you in a negative way, but that's like, oh, I have a little more freedom now, which the dark side of freedom is I don't have these responsibilities.
Yep.
I don't have this pride in how many things I have going on and how much control and ability I have. And so as that happens, usually around 50 or 60, people's kids will be out of the house. Maybe their parents will start needing care taken of them. Maybe they'll retire. Maybe they'll whatever. And as people grow in knowledge, grow in all this stuff, but their body starts backtracking and they start losing responsibilities.
Yeah.
You can almost always watch this sense that they want to fight back, that like they want to fight to hold on to the stuff they have because it's all like sand just falling.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
When I can feel in David's thing intensity. I mean, it's turning into a little bit more about David but as his life goes on, he is lonely. I mean, he ends up like asking his like niece to like lay with him to keep him warm. I mean, he has no one that is like close to him. And so I do feel like it's a little bit of like celebrity syndrome where he grows up as kind of like having close friends and a wife and all this really good stuff and all his relationships are solid. But then I don't know if he spends too much time away or if things just fall apart or he doesn't invest so much time.
Or if people feel weird about the Bathsheba thing, if anybody knows about it.
Well, even before Bathsheba, if he's just isolated himself. Like there's just not a whole lot of people around him anymore that know him. He's known, but no one really is his friend. And, I say all this to say, the reason I wanted to talk about this is because if you are struggling with maybe it's not an addiction, but a repetitory thing, you find yourself doing something on the regular that you wish you didn't, or maybe you find yourself emotionally a little compromised in
or you find
sadness, anger, frustration, trapped and stuck.
Or you find yourself not matching or meeting people's expectations, your spouse or your boss or whoever.
I think this is a point where I used to think it was going to be more proactive, get ahead of this, just nail down, put all the accountability around you, pray about it, teach. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you this right now, God gave you a brain
Yeah.
And he wants you to be curious.
Yeah.
He really does. And he is allowing some of this stuff to continue to happen because you haven't changed your way of thinking. You have not allowed your heart to be shifted.
Yeah.
You haven't. And so in my mind, I long for anybody that's listening to this, if you have one of those things, and most of the time when we talk about these lists and we go on a little bit of an explanation of what they could be, you didn't need to wait to hear the list. You knew immediately what your thing is. I want you to stop asking God to take it away and start asking God what you need to learn.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And I know that was so counterintuitive to what I grew up with. And I think it's a healthier response. I understand holiness being set apart. I understand that God is perfect, and I understand, but God is trying to get you perfect at the core, not just in comfort, like not getting you to conform, but He wants to transform you completely.
Yeah. And that's why I think I've talked about this dude in some books he's written before, but I think like some good next steps. Counseling. Yeah, that's what we talked about last episode.
Of course.
That's a great,
for sure.
Great, or coaching or mentoring or whatever.
Pick up a book, find a podcast, get on YouTube, go down the rabbit hole.
Start learning,
curious.
Start exploring, get curious about these kind of things. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite places to start, there's this whole, bear with me. There's this whole field of study called neurotheology, where basically we're in a religion. Theology is the study of God, and theology is also the study of how the stuff that God made and kind of God's fingerprint on everything. But as created beings, as people, we believe that God made our bodies. And so neurotheology is like, we're going to be theologians, study the Bible, study what we know about God and all this kind of stuff, and mix it with brain science, not saying the Bible's not enough, but saying there's a level of natural revelation, which you can see in Romans 1, is a totally reasonable thing that the Bible totally acknowledges. Natural revelation where we know something about God because we can put the pieces together because of what He created, not necessarily what He specially revealed by speaking it. And so, as we learn more about the brain, what are we doing? We're learning about the brains God made. Mm-hmm. We're figuring out the wiring schematics and the things that God put in there. Yep. And so probably the lowest shelf kind of book for this, the one that's most accessible but still really, really good, is called Your Future Self Will Thank You, Secrets to Self-Control from the Bible and Brain Science by Drew Dyck, D-Y-C-K. Don't look up the other one. And it's like, it's from a guy who used to work at Christianity Today and has been a pastor and talked to pastors forever. And just realizes that exactly what we've talked about today, that there's a level of us not being able to control and to advance in some of these things because we're not utilizing the knowledge that God made our bodies. And so brain scientists are studying what God already knows and what God put in there.
Absolutely.
So that's a good, on the ground base level work through it kind of book. The one I already have, and one by a guy who's actually a neurotheologian, is called Renovated, God, Dallas Willard, and the Church That Transforms.
Ooh.
And Dallas Willard is this big spiritual formation guy, which is
I love
using prayer, using scripture, using other things to be to kind of lock us onto the real God and be transformed by it. So it's him and Dallas Willard in conversation, talking about how to be transformed. Those two books, we'll have them linked in the description. Did you want to talk about yours?
Yeah. Jay Stringer's book would be great, Unwanted. Yeah. And the reason I mentioned that book is because if I'm being honest, most people that are going to click on this, you're clicking on it because you have a habitual sin, a sin that you're whether it's been the digital age that's just caused you to have a sexual acting out, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's, for me, I found the one that went unchecked for the longest period of time in my life was food. It's just and I'm not saying oh man, I got so big or whatever. It was more just how much food regulated my emotional health.
And your schedule.
And my schedule. And I didn't like it. I didn't like it. And once I started to do it, and it sounds terrible. Listen, I still love pizza and I still love all the foods that I used to love. I've just learned sometimes that I get to say no and still be okay. And that changes my identity from feeling like I am being drug along by something outside of myself to
Yeah.
being somebody that's choosing something. And believe me when I tell you this, if there's anything that a person that feels when they're in addiction or they're having a struggle that I have talked to, it is feeling like they're out of control.
Yeah.
And they're feeling like they're just trying to just stay ahead of everything that's going on. And I'll tell you, I know it's hard to do this, but Jay's book does a really good job of teaching you how to slow down and not ignore what you're doing, but actually focus on where it's coming from. And it is game changer for how to be kind to yourself and considerate to yourself and offer yourself grace. And so that you can get curious enough to learn what God really already knows, that your brokenness is far from the symptoms that you see. Your brokenness is much deeper, and it is healable, and it is restored, and it can be changed at any level. And so I hope today was helpful. I hope this is encouraging to you. I'm sure we'll see and get some feedback from it as well. If you have any questions, as always, send them to Ryan. And if you
comment below.
Leave I was going to say, leave a comment. As always, we appreciate it if you subscribe or share or leave us a review. And I look forward to future discussions that'll probably have some of this kind of wrapped up in it. And again, we'll have the links to all the things that we talked about. And for the most part, I just encourage you with this. Do not be conformed any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind and heart in Christ Jesus. So have a great and glorious day in the Lord. Get curious. We'll see you later.
See ya.